with 10 plus years of experience in projects in business and technology projects in various industries from banking, airline, and transportation. On the other hand, me, the other host, Kuzey Çelebi, I'm a CAPM. I have business analysis. I'm a business analysis graduate and trained in project management. I'm volunteering at LPMN, and I worked in different countries in Canada, Germany, and Turkey. And our dear guest tonight is Min Josephson. And Min's career span includes customer experience management, process improvement, change management, training, and organizational development. He is a certified Six Sigma Black Belt and Prosky Change practitioner. He started his career with Bombardier, then moved into roles in process and change management roles in Aeroplan, Metrolinx, and most recently, he's in the banking sector. And beyond analyzing and identifying the process improvements, Min's impact as a change agent resulted from implementing the right communication skills and establishing leadership accountability, resulting in a sustained performance improvement. So this is the theme for tonight. And we are going to go into the icebreaker session. However, I'm going to read this media disclosure because we are going to broadcast session as well. So I'm going to read it pretty quickly. And by registering for this event, I grant permission to LPMN and Unstoppable Me, the organizers, to take and use visual, video, and recordings of me, including comments I may provide on my experience, regardless of modifications or alternations for any purpose whatsoever, including and without limitation, public advertising, social media, and non-public exhibition in any manner, or media whatsoever, including print, broadcast, or internet without further notice or compensation. And I waive the opportunity or right to inspect or approve the finished product or the use to which it may be put, or the copy and or illustrations used in connections therewith. So, and coming to our learning points for tonight. And as we all know, change management is demanding right now because there's always a continuous need for change in today's world, either for getting more efficient, getting more profitable, or providing more value for ourselves or for our clients too. However, neither change nor managing change is easy. That's why we're going to have a deep dive tonight into change management, and we're going to learn what changes and where and how does it fit. Also, we're going to see a model for change planning and execution of it. And we're going to understand the critical levers for successful change. So that's all from me right now. And we're going to go into the icebreaker session now. Amanda will divide us into smaller groups.
Thank you, Kusei. So we are gonna run these icebreakers. So the idea is just get to know a little bit more. So we're gonna split into I guess we are around, yeah, so we are 29 people. So probably we are gonna split into 4 to 5 groups. So we're gonna have 10 minutes to get to know each other. So maybe we can share our profession and which industry we are, and also maybe we can, if you can go to the next slide, Kusei, maybe we can talk about this topic or anything else related with change management that you want to talk. So we propose to discuss, do you consider that change management and project management are mutually beneficial disciplines? If so, how change management and project management activity can be integrated? So maybe this is something that maybe we can discuss. And so let me prepare the breakout rooms. And we're gonna have around 10 minutes. Okay, so here we go.
Hello. Hey Andrew, hi.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this ice break session. Um, I told my group in the ice break rooms, but I'm going to tell the game, feel free to share your LinkedIn profiles because this is a small group, so it's pretty nice to interact with each other afterwards, the event too. So during the event, anytime, feel free to share your connections, and it's better to connect together for the future. So we're going to start our main topic, and I'm going to hand it over to Min.
Perfect. Folks, are we all, hopefully you'll see that, if you don't mind, as part of just a housekeeping, I've sent a link that's designed to help us as part of today's presentation. Do you guys see that in the chat? And maybe Kizé, could you help? I'm going to type in what do you call that word? The code?
Mm-hmm.
5099.
Yeah, no worries. So I can help you with that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I got it. Perfect. So hopefully, I don't know, it could show up in the chat because we're actually going to be jumping to this very soon. So first off, Jaime Gonzalez, who's probably the president of this week, initially asked me to present this because he and I have an interesting relationship. We're both at TD. We do some work together, and then this topic, when he saw me talking about change, he asked me to come in and share this topic with you. And really, the goal today, in addition to wanting to hear from you guys about change, is the goal today is to kind of say, why do I talked about change? Because I always think about what happens when teams or individuals have to go through change. And I heard even from my previous little 10-minute piece with Kareem about, there's a lot of change, the perception sometimes about the failure of change. And more importantly, then, if that's sometimes a perception, what happens when we think about the process of going from today to tomorrow. And so my goal today is to present how to achieve that adoption through, we'll say that they call it 3 pillars, but in each pillar, there are 3 elements. Hopefully my hand signal came up there. And that's an important piece about understanding how change can be applied. Though I have to be honest, there's a mix of that science of change and a mix of that art, being understanding your business, understanding individuals, and being able to reflect upon what the right approach is to fix that. But to kick that off, as you see, there's the Mentimeter link somewhere up there. As we go to this next slide, I am going to ask you to please open up Mentimeter, which is, I think, the first of the chat things, and you'll see a code. Hopefully you can copy and paste that code. The code again is 505-97485. So hopefully that appears somewhere at the top of the chat. And we're going to go through the first piece of today's exercise is really to get a sense of a word cloud and then a poll about what we're here for today. So on the next slide, the question is, in Menti, what comes to mind when you hear about change management? And so hopefully when we go to that slide around Menti, we're going to be able to see the word cloud kind of explode. The only rule is that you can only do short phrases or short, keywords, buzzwords. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you guys are thinking. Does that work, Amanda Kizé, to open up Menti right now?
Yes. So can you share, Kizé?
You do not see? I'm sharing that part actually right now.
No,
I'm trying to open, but then asking me for a user ID to register.
No?
Mm.
The Mentimeter.
So you only have to.
I'm going to reshare it.
Which browser are you using? I know when I went to use Edge, it forced me to register and it doesn't give me a spot to put a name in. But if I go to Chrome, at the top right at the top before all the nonsense, you can type in the code. So Chrome works better than Edge on this thing. Edge will force you to sign up and then not give you an option of putting anything in.
Okay. Okay, then perfect. So for those who are doing it, this is helping a lot because it gives me a great context. And so I see a few of you are in, so that helps. And obviously we'd appreciate seeing a few more of you. I know there's like 20 or well, just under 20 people right now who are joining. So I'd love to see some other concepts. What comes to mind when you hear change management? Folks, and of course, hopefully you'll see that the link is in the chat. I know it's gotten hidden by all the, if you look for Amanda's name, you'll probably see the Menti link and code. And we're going to need this for not one, but 2 other polls coming up. So please keep your browser open afterwards. So what's in it for me? That's great. opportunity, work processes, great things. I see 5 different people. Anything else you guys are thinking of? You hear change management. I mean, from the discussions that you just had in the icebreaker, was there anything that came? Oh, some new people. That's important. Okay. So this is a great start. Are we ready to go back to the PowerPoint? Or are there people still wanting to add some comments?
We're still getting some final comments.
Perfect. This version of Word Cloud definitely makes me turn my head more. Sorry.
Exactly.
But
so before really, going back to the presentation, I'm going to read through what answers we got. So our question was, what comes to mind when you hear change management? And we have control, work, psychology, process, training, transition, opportunity, work, process communication. What's in it for me? That's a great one. Project efficiency, behavior and culture training, resistance, transition process, and I think a couple of more that maybe I skipped. It's all around the place, and happy I see. Yep. And now we're gonna go back to our slide.
Perfect. And so on that slide, let's kind of compare to what when we give courses around change management, we actually focus on now. When Tuesday goes back to the PowerPoint, what's great is that a lot of you had some matching elements to what we're looking at in our presentation. And so we'll just wait for that to come up. But it's really important because this helps me kind of give better anecdotes. And here you're going to see 6 different items. You see the managing to resistance, which I saw before on the thing, the sponsorship. And that's a mix of leadership. So I didn't see that one too much, but the employee feedback, that's an important piece. Communications, of course, was a big one. Coaching, I did see that. I'm trying to read sideways, sorry, because I still have the screenshot. And providing knowledge. So if you think about the role that change does is anyone could do this, meaning a project manager, a BA. It's all about saying, if you're looking at something that's going to change, how to incorporate these aspects and many others that you could think of. Let's go to another piece of the exercise is what are the actual tactics? So again, hopefully you're still open in Menti, everyone. It's the same code. And I think it should automatically pop up for everyone, is the poll that asks, what, does that pop up, Kisei? I guess it's the second part. So now the question is, and this is great, because it seems that few of you have actually seen change, let's talk about when you see the questions, what do you see happen? Have you had experience with training? You can pick multiple options, by the way. Presentations made about the change. Surveys. Have you actually seen the strategies and plans so that you know what the roadmap is? Or have you been a participant of the interview focus groups? And more importantly, what of post-celebration or recognition have you seen offered? And so obviously, this is where I'm not surprised that training is pretty high on the list. And unfortunately, those 2 ones in the middle are always the ones that I think a lot of people kind of don't think about as much. Oh, there's a bit of a flip here, but training is still a huge element. Training presentations are usually the first 2 things that do come to mind, but I was really curious about how all of these are important pieces to delivering change. So that was something I wanted to kind of point out in terms of our first element. So that's a great first start. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to move into that next part of the of our agenda. So Kisei, if you go now back to you have a real cool way of going from the agenda to the first part of our pillars exercise. These slides in. So let's start with 3 things that are going to happen about the pillars of change. Having come from both a process background, a change background, and by the way, I've done project management through PMI. The first aspect of applying change really depends on these two other very important factors that kind of say, why do you deploy change? It's that the leadership has a clear strategy direction, right? So this is like a different view of your triangle: quality, cost, time. The second piece is, what's the actual mandate that the project or initiative has? And then more importantly, the only other question I'll ask before going into it is, what's my role? What is the people impact role? And by that, we talk about the examples that you just saw on the previous video. So the word cloud around ideas about, is this a hard change to adopt? What tactics beyond training, communications, do we really need to think about? And that's dependent upon the other two levers. So I can't do this change on my own. Likewise, very little happens when leadership has a great plan, but they don't have people to deliver it. And similarly, a project manager, sometimes they don't have the leadership in front of them either, but then they also don't have the change aspect. And then they question that they made the great, software or some other deliverable, but no one's actually adopting it. So the first pyramid is this model, is to question, where do you fit in terms of being assigned the mandate? The second important part is really your approach. Similar to the world of project management, there's many different approaches that you could take, or we'll call them models, right? There's the waterfall approach, there's the agile approach. But what's really important in this world is that irrespective of methodology, so I'll talk about further, I'm going to give you examples of models that are quite common in the world of change management. One is known as the ProSci ADKAR model. Another is the Cotter model. And then I'll even talk about a third model, Kubler-Ross. But really, the three things that have perspective, so in alignment to project management, is preparing for change, which usually means I have to understand what the impact of the change is. What is the stakeholder impact? Second piece is, when you understand the impact points, what are the best tactics to overcome those? How much learning, how much handholding, how much carrot versus stick do you need to go through that process? And the third part is, after a project has gone live, what does it actually mean to sustain change? Is it here today, gone tomorrow? And so there's a ton of tactics that a change manager, project manager has to kind of work together on. And more importantly, with the leadership model, is ensure that they agree that these are the right things I'm going to invest in. Does any of this sound foreign to anyone so far? Hopefully not. But this kind of aligns to those things that we thought about earlier, is thinking about resistance, thinking about the presentation and the goals of how resistance or sponsorship and coaching people come into play in these three steps. The last of the third important pillar is this, is the three states of change. It's funny, we talk about, am I assigned to the right project? It depends upon what is the current state. What is the process that you expect to happen? And more importantly, when I meet people, they kind of want the change to happen like this. And I got to be honest, that rarely happens. It's a series of steps. So it starts with the current state, it kind of moves to a transition state. A transition state meaning there's some people who might be piloting for change and other people who might take steps backwards. I wish to say we've never had setbacks in the world of change, but it's something that we have to be sometimes acknowledged to. And that finally leads to the future state. So when we speak of that final third piece of the puzzle, is around the three states of change, and what activities, or more importantly, what reaction should happen during any of these three. Those three pieces are what would actually be top of mind, or I keep in my back pocket in order to work into the world of change. And that world of change means that this model hopefully makes sense to you, that if I understand those three aspects, I look at what the project is trying to do, design, develop, and deliver something. More importantly is this question, and I saw it before as another way of saying, what's in it for me, is another way of saying, what's the reason for change, which is that next, you hit the space bar for a sec, it should show up. There we go. And that's where that concept of how do I know what the transition state will look like, is understanding what has to change. Is it a big bang? Is it mandatory, regulatory? What are the key drivers that say start, stop, start, stop? And the final piece is these three terms of the people side. That, again, it's not necessarily a change manager that has to be there, but if you could think about, what does it mean to engage the audience? What does it mean to have them adopt and use? Adopt is one piece, is saying, I get it. I get why we're changing, but using it consistently, repeatedly, is a key challenge to making sure that you have value and success from the end of a project. Hopefully that piece kind of aligns well I'm going to do a check-in again, if you don't mind. But this time, I'm going to enter a new code, right? If I may. Oh, you already did. Perfect.
Yes,
If
I
you
already
look
put in
at
the
it
chat.
on
Yeah.
screen, perfect. I'm trying to use polling because it kind of changes how I describe certain aspects. So on the next poll, and I'm afraid because you'll see there's a new ID. And by the way, I know that someone asked about, I think it was Ahmed, is that it's recommended to go through Chrome, right, everyone? So hopefully everyone's there. Is really, because I've seen some interesting perspectives, I'm going to ask you this. What makes for good change? And I'm not going to use the word, meaning the unsuccessful. I think that a lot of you have kind of presented me in the previous two polls some interesting perspectives that tells me you get what change is. But I'm going to actually think about the change that you've gone through. Did you see these different aspects, or I'll call them typical tactics about, did they present a clear why? Did you get a what's in it for me? Did they explain how to go through change? Did they actually support you through the change, which is the, am I able to do the change? And finally, I'm going to be honest, the use of carrot and sticks. You know, it sounds rough, the sticks part, but I really want to know, what kind of change have you experienced? And again, I see a good upfront about the why for change. I see some others that are all tied in the middle. And surprisingly, I only see one time a use of a carrot stick, or stick, or stick. And I'll explain why, maybe that last one, why it's an interesting one, because the why sometimes is the carrot, and the why sometimes is the stick, if the business presents it in such a way that it makes sense. Okay. Does that look like we have a fair number of
Yep, I think we
answers,
got
guys?
all. Yep.
Perfect. So folks, I'm gonna just relate one of the pieces that I saw there, and it's great that I saw a lot of the answers at the beginning. If you don't mind, I'm just gonna reiterate the carrot and stick one of what it means. Oh, no, it actually does tie to this too, but imagine this. Carrot and sticks is an important piece because it really speaks to, is there enforcement? Is there both a desire to change, or is there an enforcement to ensure change, right? That's an important sometimes lever to have, in addition to all the other pieces that are very important. That last one is the one where you have to make sure people understand what are the consequences of not changing, both for the goals of the change or the implications to you. But let's speak to another perspective of change. And this was brought up during the Q&A. Well, sorry, the Q&A meaning I was given a set of questions before the presentation. And so transformation is another type of change. It's another type of project, if you will. And the reason why I brought this one was this diagram was to kind of relate the fact that when we've done transformations, there's still, even though it's an important big picture, customer experience, et cetera, there's still these two items right there, number 1 and 4, that speaks about, one, the people dimension of change, which is now understanding how those questions about did you experience a successful change, were all those factors included? But that number 4 was an interesting one because the role of a change leader does not have to be the word change management as a function. So not to say I'm putting myself out of a job, but it's that good change managers or good change leaders can come from the people running the project. They can come from the sponsors at the executive level, but also the sponsors who are responsible for the teams that are being affected by change. And so that's an important piece to remember about what happens with change. The other piece, though, if we now tie back to these three, is the outcome of how this model now ties back to our other sides, which is around what happens around sponsorship. And I've started, again, connecting those three pillars around the pyramid, around the 3 steps of plan, prepare, that will plan, prepare, / manage, sustain through to those 3 states. But this one is the one that probably trips up change managers or PMs the most. Is we always have a sponsor who thinks that there's certain functions that I'd rather the practitioner, the PM, the BA, the change leader to do, because they don't have the time, they don't have the effort, the ability to see it through. And we as practitioners, either in the PM world, change manager, we know that our sponsors have value. And it's funny enough, they tell us that I need the sponsor to stand up. I need the sponsor to be active. I need the sponsor to be there and help build the momentum of this shift. And so that kind of ties into the word cloud that we've seen with the world of sponsors, is that typically in change, the biggest challenge is this. If you're engaging a sponsor, how do you make sure the sponsor carries their weight versus how do I carry my responsibility? I'm not, as a change leader, typically the one presenting what the change is. I am not the one who presents the benefits and the what's in it for you, because it's the business leader, the sponsor of that initiative, who probably has more credibility and also ownership for that. And that's where this kind of inverse relationship comes in terms of coaching the leaders. So when we talk about coaching, that's an important piece of this puzzle. The three things that I bring up to sponsors are: one, they have to be the ones active and visible to participate, presenting things, being aware of what the change is and understanding the change. The building the coalition piece is an important piece, because typically a team that's being brought in to lead a change, both from a project perspective or a change perspective, they're not actually always from the business. And the challenge here is that you introduce a project team to roll out a change, but it's, again, the sponsor who's responsible for making sure that they have connection to the business. In the world I've come from, it's typically, say, a PMO office who's assigned all the resources to make this change lead, but it's the business that's affected, the business like your contact center or any other frontline group. And so there's always a disconnect between my leadership, right, from the PMO that wants successful delivery against the quality, cost, time of the project, and what does it mean to work with the frontline businesses and their level of executive. The last part about communicating support is an important piece, because it's the one that's sometimes forgotten by our executives. This next piece is one where executives ask us, how do you plan to deliver the change? And this is an important piece, because similar to the world of project management, think about the fact that you could go in a fast iterative approach, you can go into a slower, I don't want to say waterfall, but there are different approaches in the world of PM. And now we're going to talk about what those approaches might look like in the world of project management, in the world of change management. So if those are the three key steps, let's think about the first slide that's going to talk about one of those models. And the one I'm going to talk about is ADKAR. This is the one that's pretty simple, because maybe I should make and share with you. Not only do you see the words there, but I always carry from my training this little ADKAR box. And it's something about making sure that any business is aware to understand, how do they understand the awareness for the need for change? Do they have a desire to participate in the change? Do they have the knowledge on how to change? The A is the ability, and R is the reinforcement of that change. And this is something that any manager should hold near to them as kind of the steps, if you will, not stage gate, but the steps of saying, if I'm thinking of introducing something, before I send them to a training, before I actually say you need to make sure that these sequential steps kind of represent the journey of what the person who's impacted might feel. And we're going to actually use an example from later on in this deck to go further on this model. The second one, and this is a big one that people inadvertently don't realize, they go when companies are doing transformation. We say the word urgency for change, but it's really that transformation it's the next big thing. And so this person named John Cotter has created these what they call the 8 steps for change. And it starts with that first circle at the very top, which is called creating the urgency, the sense of urgency for change. And the reason why this is an important approach versus ADKAR is that it's responsible for building up the organization as a whole, saying that those words I used previously, the ABCs, you'll see that there's a sense of urgency that goes into making sure you have the right coalition, the vision, and the army, meaning that it's not one change group, but a series of participants who are going to help kind of espouse what this change is about. And it goes all the way through about creating wins, creating acceleration to instituting change. And so companies that are doing things like ways of working, this is a common approach that you would see, or a company that's introducing a big new product of customer experience. This is typically what they would end up doing both internally to the company, is making sure that staff realize what this change is and going through a more sequential series of steps than what you have seen with ADKAR. The last one is a bit tricky to talk about because the word emotional response in a professional setting could mean something like, oh, let's imagine you worked with a contact center, but it was unionized. And let's imagine that there's a great deal of stress going on in the business. Unlike the other two models, which focuses immediately upon working on a forward solution, this one actually takes a real important view that we understand the minute we get into that project, we're going into a world of landmines. And so the example here was when I was with Aeroplan, before they, when they were in 2005, they had just spun off from Air Canada. And so as a unionized workforce, they were in deep shock to no longer be part of that company, and then introducing to them that they now belong to a new union. So that whole transition of leaving one kind of employer to another very much kind of covered those first three steps, right? You'd be angry that this is happening. There's enough turmoil in that business of that day, which was called Canadian Airlines and Air Canada. And certainly the word depression could be seen as professionally, a real bad impact to the business and the lack of service. But eventually you're trying to get back out of that and move towards a series of acceptance. And funny enough, all three of these models go through those three versions of, do I understand my pyramid for success? Do I know that the leadership understands what the change will look like? Do we have the right project management approach to do this, as well as change approach? Second piece around that, three models of preparing for change, managing it, and sustaining. I have to look at the models and what they connect to. And the third piece is understanding the transition state of what that change would look like. So let's think about how ADKAR, because it's the one that was the easiest, and more importantly, I wanted to kind of take you back to a presentation that was done last month. Hopefully, maybe I should get could you guys use the reaction icon and tell me how many of you recall attended Eduardo's presentation on this topic? I happen to have watched it after the fact, so I'll give myself a clap that I did see it. Hopefully you guys see that reaction. Do you guys see the reactions? Is there a fair number of people who saw it? Okay, good. This is an important piece, folks, is that I wanted to use this example because it's common view of where change would have helped deliver success. And so if you look at this slide carefully, these were from what Eduardo presented in terms of introducing Agile to his organization. And for that matter, I'm going to get in trouble saying this, many other organizations, including ones I may have been part of, have all gone through these challenges. But now let's take it against the lens of ADKAR. And by that, I mean, I'm going to start to walk you through when you look at the problems that were encountered, the barriers, one of the first, really bad scores, 60+%, was against the fact that they didn't understand the need for change, right? So that's your awareness. So as a company, do we properly do it? Is the desire there? And the key word here was the unwillingness of people to participate in change versus saying, here's the next best thing since, say, sliced bread. How do you want to engage people to be part of it? And that's why the desire piece is to know that they want to overcome that unwillingness and be willing to move with change. What about the ability part? Well, here's the funny part. Knowledge, right? It's kind of funny. Insufficient training. Well, if you recall in our earlier slides, training was seen as one of these great, solutions to it. In fact, it's always considered the first top of mind, but insufficient training really reflects upon not just giving them the course book, not just having them show up one time, but really understanding how do they really absorb this new change? Is it one course? Is it a series of courses? How do you go back and forth to make sure that your ongoing learning is there? Which ties into the next part, is ability is, just having them take the course doesn't guarantee their success. the experience of, say, in the world of sports, the same thing. You can train, you can learn all the right skills of a sport. That doesn't mean that you're going to be the superstar of the sport from an ability perspective without the right training and vigor. And the last part, and again, this is a funny one because it spoke to something we brought up in our first pyramid about sponsorship, is the lack of executive and management support. So if you think about reinforcement, here's a key problem. Reinforcement, or the lack of reinforcement, is going to be your downfall as well. So this activity that Eduardo presented was the perfect example for me, at least, to say how ADCAR could have anticipated these questions and really addressed in advance to going out for the change how you want to approach it. Cotter would have done the same model. I don't think Kubler-Ross would have been as needed, or any other, but ADCAR seems to be the easiest one I could think of when I saw Eduardo's presentation, especially when he talked about that challenge of bringing it. So think about your own organization and thinking of these questions or a series of steps. Is it clear that that would work for your company? Being on the right questions. Yeah.
So maybe you could say, if you can come back to the previous slide, so maybe we can have the chance to respond these questions from Jaime, because I guess it's very related to that. So the question from Jaime is, do we have coaches for change management similar to Agile coaches when the organization is transforming or adopting Agile?
Not always. Bad answer, but it's true. What we had was, we assumed that coaches or Scrum Masters sometimes can assume that role, right? Maybe that's a bad way of saying it, but there's always an assumption that we will help the business using any tactic we like, the experience that we have to help the business. I've only seen it in one or two areas where they've used change management coaching. And again, I'm saying that's usually when we've done some reorg projects that are very sensitive. So you think of the Kubler-Ross, because we have to prepare managers to understand what are the impacts of how people are going to react. And so we coach them through that. It's not just a course. We actually sit with them and we make them go through assessments of saying, what happens when your people do this? Are you ready for that? But from this Agile piece in itself, they don't actually coach the change management piece, though we've tried parts of it. Does that help? I know it's a bad answer, but it's the truth. Unless there's
No,
someone
that's
who
good.
is.
Thank you. That's good. Thank you.
Okay. I saw there's a question, but I can't see it anymore. Oh, yeah, Jaime, you had a second question though. I did see that you asked about the technical business background of change. Honestly, diversity is key to a role like this, because there are different viewpoints. So being trained on change management is one thing, but being able to apply it is another. So even if we had all the same background, we wouldn't necessarily be able to apply it the same. So I kind of say that technical and business background help, but it's the diversity of how you apply it. Let's go back to the third of our three pillars and how I would address this one in terms of the reality of change. That third one is around that transition state. And so the big question that comes to business is, can you guarantee that this is going to be successful? And say it in three ways. They're going to say, what's the speed of adoption? And speed of adoption is a key one. If you start hitting the things, perfect. Is really around this. How fast do employees adopt a change? So have you now seen that Agile examples? Are we all Agile after going through one series of training or one series of sprints? Probably not. But from an executive view, they kind of think about it in that way. Ultimate utilization is a funny word, because they kind of expect that once you've been trained and seen it, you can do it. But we know the reality is that people need to be continually coached to refine it and improve it. So that's a key challenge, is to say that every employee has gone through a training, great, but to be proficient in it, that last bullet is going to say, are they really good at doing this? And let's be realistic, is that even if I use one department for change, I have to think of different ways in which some employees get change faster, some employees might be struggling with change. And then I have to think of why that is at an individual level. Or is there historical information that should have allows me to better prepare, manage, and bring about sustainment. With this diagram though, and this diagram speaks to the fact that it's simple to see it as 3 steps, but imagine a team that's going through releases, these 2, sub releases would be an example of change. And there'd even be perhaps a 3rd thing. And the world I'm going to give you is, in a big company, it's easy to say that we're going to create a new customer experience program, but imagine those 3 changes being: 1, like the example I gave you, you're part of a new union. And that change is, pretty dramatic to me. So that's your Kubler-Ross. That 2nd change is, oh, we have new products and services. And the 3rd change is, oh, by the way, there's a new business approach happening simultaneously. We're going to thin client. And you think about, if you're sitting there as contact center agent, how painful that must be. But then from an executive view is, how do I explain to the executives what should happen in terms of how fast can employees adopt when there's not just one project of change, but multiple layers? And this diagram probably also applies to our world of Agile, which goes in multiple MVPs. So we don't change at a sprint level, hopefully we don't, but we should be seeing that there can be change at every MVP, but the overall project is about that new great invention, but you're constantly seeing incremental change coming. And that's what this could also reflect well. So folks, we've hit, believe it or not, wow, fast. Yeah. Almost 25 minutes, which I shouldn't get in trouble because I was told to cut it to 25 minutes, but you know what? It's not a thankless job, because really when you introduce yourself about who wants to change, this is the first reaction, is that you really don't have problem talking about what change is, but the minute change is going to impact them, it's like chirping, nothing else but like birds chirping, quiet, because people are really afraid about what change means. But more importantly, every role should be responsible for being able to lead change. So in absence of a change manager, you'll see in the next slide that there's one big question: is anyone can lead the change, but doing so, not just as change manager, but perhaps as a PM or a coach, a scrum master, or even a BA, is thinking about these 3 views of how change intersects with the work that you're doing, right? So you talked about that pyramid, having a good plan just for change, and more importantly, understanding what kind of phasing should people go through to achieve that change. Folks, that kind of hopefully gives a good view of what I was asked to share about change. I have a whole bunch of other information, glad to follow up if you need, but hopefully that kind of helps people with change. Does that work?
Thank you, Min. So maybe because we have a couple of questions here. So in the chat we have a question from Cheryl. So the question is, what are your thoughts to approach resistance to change relating to the issue of hybrid work style as we move towards the new normal?
Well, resistance is natural to any idea that comes up. Really, the business has to demonstrate the why and what's in it for me, right? So it is, I'll take it from the company perspective, because I happen to be sitting on a team that there's someone beside me who works on what they call future workplace. And really there's a company benefit view, but now how do you translate that in terms of the employee benefit? If you have enough benefit, the word resistance shouldn't be as strong, right? But has the company truly demonstrated benefit for you? It's not what's in it for the company, it's what's in it for you. That key piece, or I hate to say the word carrot and stick, are key pieces to understanding what takes away the barrier of resistance.
Thank you very much.
Although, Vinay, I like your answer, Vinay, that you included, which connects to that earlier part about the managing resistance and a lot of those tactics. Those were the, people don't like to talk about them, but they're built into your process of change, that is.
Yeah, probably. So I can read what Vinay said is just included employees during brainstorming phase. B, understanding their background and lifestyle, and C, being flexible with the options provided to the employees.
Perfect.
Exactly.
So in the deck, we did answer some questions from registration, but I know that we hit time, but like, how do you want to, I'm still around if you need, but you tell me what you want to do with this part now.
Yeah, so maybe because of interest of time, because I know that the topic is very interesting. So probably maybe we can answer the first question, Min, and then we can maybe publish those questions in our LinkedIn group.
Okay. Which is that the next slide?
Yeah, so if we can go ahead, Kusei.
Yep.
With the first, maybe identify an engagement and
yeah
session.
So this question, so what I did is I looked at the questions and I tried to take all those light blue are the questions that came before this presentation that they wanted me to kind of look at, and I tried to put them against these 4 kind of milestones about identify, engage, rolling out the change, organizational consideration, other considerations. But the first one is like, when do you engage change? Well, I'll be honest, it depends on how change is assigned to your business. Is it something that you actually have a dedicated team that's billable? Well, it depends upon how do you want to invest at the start and then let them ramp up? Or are you expecting people to have change knowledge as, no offense, the side of their desk, which a lot of PMs have been told they sometimes have to do on their own. So in a perfect world, you would assign at least someone to help prepare the landscape for change, but then hand over the deliverable of change back to the business if you're not comfortable with paying that part of the budget. The second part was to motivate employees to embrace change versus resistance. Well, again, it goes back to, actually, Vinay, you kind of answered some good pieces of it, but a lot of those middle tactics in the earlier slides around focus groups and around having good strategy plans are reflective of actually meeting teams and going through exercises that allow us to know from surveys, et cetera, what the sentiment is. And by having that visibility up front, it makes you aware of what the resistance will look like. And therefore, you can now create plans to basically mitigate them. But if you don't take enough information up front, like surveys, interviews, focus groups, you won't know what resistance looks like until you get hit and stop by it. You want to go through the next series? Any other questions through the chat?
We don't have more questions on the chat. No. So maybe I don't know if you want to like close with other final thoughts about the topic, Min, and to answer a couple of questions there, and maybe we can do the wrap up.
Yep. I mean, that rolling out a change is probably very good to be the next one, because it really talks about what are the role of making change work. So the 3 questions were around who approves the need and the actions to implement change well. It's a mix of the project team having these are the right tactics based upon the feedback and surveys that we received, but ultimately it's your leadership. So you go back to that active, their coalition and communication role. And that's when you talk about the communication, how should organizations communicate change? Well, it's relying upon how your business is normally set up, but also making sure that the lead of that change is very active to it. And that last question, the application of agile versus waterfall, maybe on the very next slide, if you jump to that one, because I did want to make sure I provided a model. Now, for those of you who are doing agile, the diagram on the left will reflect all the different sprints all the way through to a release. And what happens is that you're constantly, kind of like my previous, 3-color Pac-Man red, yellow, green diagram, it reflects that there's always going to be incremental change before you realize the full final result. And when you think of the Agile Manifesto, the last one, the 4th one about responding to change is ultimately key. Responding to change means being adaptable to the individual situation, to being successful. So that's where the adaptability, but you need tools like interviews, you need tools like surveys, you need good feedback mechanisms. So you're not just putting a plan on paper and then pushing it forward without considerations.
Perfect. Thank you, Min. So I guess it has been a very interesting topic to discuss. We have a lot of information here, but for sure we are going to share the rest of the question that we couldn't answer tonight, but for sure we are going to post it on our LinkedIn group as well. So let me just take the opportunity to announce our next session. So we are going to have in November, our third PM Bistro. It will be around cybersecurity. So stay tuned about the topic. So this is something that is a hot topic now. And also please feel free to join for the ones who hasn't joined our PM Bistro group on LinkedIn. So please feel free to join. And also this webinar, it will be in YouTube channel as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. And also, we will appreciate if you can take the moment to share your thoughts and what we did for this webinar. So I will post on the chat the link for our survey. So please feel free to make some comments and how we can improve for next session. So I would want to thank you, Min, for sharing this interesting information. So I guess everyone that we are in the project management field, we have a better understanding in which moment and how to engage the change management team into our project in order to be successful. So I don't know if you have final thoughts, Min or Kusei, around that.
I want to thank Min. For a short period of time, I think this was a pretty nice overview about change management, and we all got a better perspective about it. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining in. As Amanda said, we have the links here. Make sure to follow us on our LinkedIn group so that you can see the updates and some videos about this session, previous sessions, and for the next sessions too. So feel free to follow us and feel free to follow the LPMN's website too, because there are newsletters there and news updates there you can see. And finally, our YouTube channel, all the presentations will be there. So if you want to just come back and rewatch it, it will be there. Thanks a lot again for joining, and thanks, Min, again for your presentation.
So I don't know, Min, if you are still there. Any final thoughts, comments?
Oh, no, I'm still here. Well, thank you so much again. I hope that this kind of gives you guys a great direction of what change can do for you. And by all means, feel free to connect so that you can you see the other ways in which it would be a great complement to what you're already doing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Fantastic
everyone.
presentation.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night. Thank you.
Okay, thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.